everybody. Welcome to Inside the Chambers. I'm your host, Chris Chambers. It's been a while since we had this podcast, and the main reason was to educate the local residents of Hillsborough County about elected officials, running for office, what their platform is, their background and history, and ultimately, why should we vote for them? So today we're coming from the lovely Sterling Cigar Bar and Lounge in Ybor City, historic Ybor City area. Beautiful lounge here if you ever get a chance to check it out on 7th Avenue. Great owners, great management and staff, so beautiful venue. So today our first guest back inside the chambers is Christine Edwards.
Thanks for having me.
No, I'm happy you're here. Christine, you're running for judge in Hillsborough County, countywide.
Yes, sir.
So I'm happy to dig in, kind of know about the race, why you want to do it, and what your plans are. But before we get to that, I just want to know a little bit about your background. Like, who are you, and what makes you qualified to take on this prestigious position?
That's a lot in one question. Right out the gate.
Right out the gate.
Right out the gate. Well, I'm running for county judge here in Hillsborough County. Yep. It's Group 11. I have one opponent, which means that we will end this election in the primary, which I think is really important for people to understand that this will not be going all the way to a November election, which is the one that most people associate elections with.
Okay.
So August 20th is the primary election date, and you can vote by mail-in if you opt in, which is different than how we've been voting before by mail-in.
Correct.
And then early voting will last for the 2 weeks prior, and then August 20th will be the election day. So I am a Hillsborough County native. I grew up in the Braden-Valrico area, so Hillsborough County is very near and dear to my heart. I went to high school, Bloomingdale High School, go Bulls. And I went to school at UCF, and then ultimately Stetson, I went to law school.
Okay.
From there, I was in criminal defense practice for almost 10 years before I went out on my own in 2019 and opened up my own firm. And I also work for the state of Florida doing Marchman Act cases for regional counsel, which is a problem-solving court that helps individuals that have substance abuse disorders. And I really love that work that I do there.
All right. So it sounds like you have a very well-rounded background. So, I think most would think that you're qualified for this, and I think that's very important for these judicial seats, having that background, practice in different areas so you can be fair and impartial when the different cases come before you. So,
absolutely.
But one thing I think it was very important that I wanted to stress that you brought up is how this race will be decided in the primaries. And like you said, a lot of people wait till November to go out. We have a lot going on this election cycle. So remember that, keep that in mind. The primary date is going to be important. That's when the judges will be decided. So I know a lot of people like to sit back and say, well, hey, my primary vote, it doesn't count. But it definitely does, and it impacts and affects a lot. So remember that, go out and vote for a primary, not just the general, but your primaries as well, because there's a lot riding on this as well. So back into, what did you always want to become a lawyer, go into law? How did that come about?
Like in the very beginning? Yeah, being a lawyer was always a dream of mine. I studied pre-law in undergrad and then went off to law school. So that was always the trajectory, was to be a lawyer. Ultimately, I found myself devoting my life to the practice of law. I never married and I never had children, so law is quite literally the greatest love of my life. Might sound a little pathetic, but I've devoted everything that I have to my practice and to helping others and serving this community. So I thought that, and I do believe that the courtroom is the greatest arena in which the greatest work is being done to help other people, and that inspired me to run for county judge.
Okay. So Christina, at what point did you know that you want to take your legal profession to the next step, take it to the bench, become a judge?
So this is something that I've been thinking about for several years prior to me filing. I will say that the catalyst for it was probably the pandemic.
Okay.
Not to bring up a subject that nobody really likes to talk about, but I think it's important to recognize that it changed a lot of things for the legal profession. 1 minute I was running around the courthouse, in and out, handling a bunch of cases, and then all of a sudden I was behind a computer screen, and we were doing Zoom court. And I found that very challenging and struggling. I struggled through adapting to the technology of not being in a courtroom.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, like, how badly I needed to get back there.
Correct.
And how do I get back to working in a courtroom? And it became a mission to say, that is exactly where I want to be. It's exactly where I belong. And that was when I actually reached out to try to get a job with regional counsel.
Okay.
Something that got me back in there on my feet, advocating, litigating. I needed to feel like I was doing the work that I was used to doing. And I didn't feel that way when I was behind a computer screen. So when I went back to work for regional counsel and had an opportunity to get back into a courtroom, I thought, I never want to leave this place.
Correct.
What can I do to stay here?
No, that's interesting you bring it up, the pandemic, how a lot of the hearings and the cases were administered through Zoom. One time I was on a hearing, and I don't know if it's a surprise, but I like cigar bars. And I was in a cigar bar, and the hearing officer, judge, like, Mr. Chambers, I want to remind you, you're in court, put the cigar down. Maybe it was a little unprofessional, I don't know about the decorum, but she could have been a little bit more flexible. Needless to say, I kept smoking my cigar.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's very interesting you brought that up. So I was doing some research on you, and I saw, a little personal now, I saw that you assisted in a family member who was incarcerated, getting their freedom. Could you mind telling us about that?
Yeah, that's my favorite story, my all-time favorite story. My uncle was sentenced for trafficking in methamphetamines and drugs.
Okay.
And he was given a 30-year sentence at the age of 50. And at the time that he was sentenced was a time that I didn't have a relationship with him. He was, as many people who are struggling with substance abuse disorders, they're estranged from their families.
Right.
And he went to prison, and I was in law school at the time. And I started receiving jail mail, which if you work in criminal defense, you know that jail mail happens often.
Yeah.
A lot of people will reach out to you. A lot of people will look for help. And, Uncle Bobby started writing me from jail. And I was just in law school trying to figure out, studying every day and exams and all the pressures that come along with law school. And so I really didn't even open it. I just threw the mail in a pile, and it started to grow. And then one day, maybe after a glass of wine or two, I started opening up the jail mail and reading what he was talking about. And then, of course, the advocate in me, the righteous fighter in me thought that there was something going on in the letters that I was reading. So I started spending my days at the courthouse going through his many files. And that required, back then there was paper files. So you had to physically go down there and pull the file and run the copies. And I would say for a couple years while I was in law school, probably 1.5, 2 years, I researched and compiled a case. And I eventually took that to my boss at the time, and I said, I think we have something here. I think that was something worth looking into. And he said, all right, kid, you think you got something here, I'll file a motion for you. And I had already put it all together, and he helped me sort of refine it to make it legally sound. And we filed the 3850. And for anybody who has ever done any sort of criminal defense work, post-conviction work is very difficult. And 3850s are filed all the time and granted rarely any of the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't something that we thought was going to be successful, but he sort of wanted to entertain me and say, we'll do it if you want to do it.
Okay.
What ended up happening was I became a lawyer shortly after the hearing got set.
Okay.
It had kind of lingered in the court system, just going through the process for over a year. And by the time it actually got set for hearing, I had become a lawyer. I'd been sworn in. And I had maybe been practicing 6 months.
Okay.
And he comes in and he says, you're going to handle it. And so I said, great, way to go in with the biggest case that you could possibly, not to mention it's a big deal, but then it's got to be your uncle.
It's your family, yeah,
it's got to be your uncle. I had never really contemplated what it would look like to win something like that. I just wanted to say that I had done the best job that I could. Went in there and won that motion.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think the better story is really what happens on the flip side of that.
Okay.
So, Bobby had struggled with substance abuse his whole life. He did serve 5 years for the crime that he had committed. And when he was released, and he was released on constitutional grounds, when he was released, Bobby, at the age of over 50, got married for the first time, had children for the first time. The first child he named after me as sort of like a nod of gratitude. And now he runs his own business and lives a sober, healthy life. And the epitome is exactly what we would strive for. That's the reward, is seeing that life be completely different than it was a couple years ago.
And I think that's so amazing, because not only did you change his life, I think it's safe to say that you changed generations. How he was able to change his life and put on a whole nother trajectory for his family.
And it changed my life too, significantly, especially working in this field, because I realized how much access I had just by virtue of being a lawyer.
Correct.
How I had access to the courts because I was a niece who was in law school. I had a way in because I worked for a lawyer, and then eventually I was a lawyer. And I had an awareness that because of that, that's how Bobby got before the court, and that's how Bobby was successful. There were 50 other inmates that day that got sent back to prison and never were heard.
Because they didn't have somebody to advocate for them.
That's exactly right.
The way you advocate for your uncle. That's an amazing story. So, I know the whole wrongful incarceration thing. It's always been a topic, but it's something that sounds like it's kind of resurging now more than ever. I mean, I don't know, like, what's the percentage you think of incarcerated people in America today are wrongfully incarcerated, or is it hard to put a number on that?
Well, no, I mean, they come out with statistics every year. What it is currently, I don't know off the top of my head. To be fair, Bobby wasn't wrongfully incarcerated,
correct.
And he did serve time. The problem was the length of the sentence and whether or not that was fair to sentence somebody on a drug charge for 30 years. That was essentially a death sentence in Bobby's case being 50, right? He would have died there, and he would have never had an opportunity to do it with what his life is now. And so it is a hot topic. It is one of those things that gets a lot of traction, and we should be mindful of it, but that wasn't the case for Bobby.
But nevertheless, he had somebody to advocate, and that definitely changed his life. And I think a lot of people that's incarcerated probably wish they had a family member like you, a Christine, in their corner.
And it gives me awareness too, and I think that'll serve me well on the bench, is understanding how difficult it is for somebody who doesn't have resources, and especially in the county court, which we commonly refer to it as the people's court. A lot of people that will come before whoever sits on that bench are going to be people who are not represented, and so there has to be an awareness of what that looks like for the litigant, and how that is their opportunity to be heard by the court, and how important it is to hear both sides of the case, right? Everybody should, in Bobby's case, it was sort of like the state attorney was driving the train the entire time. And it wasn't until somebody came in to sort of say, wait a minute, something's wrong, everybody pay attention over here, we've got something going on. I think it's really important that he had a voice, and everybody that comes before the court has a voice on both sides.
Okay, awesome. I watched this documentary a while back where it was talking about the criminal justice system and reform, but they highlighted some cases where there's one individual, he was on probation for almost 10 years. He kept violating probation, extending, and if you look at it, he probably would have just took the initial sentence.
Would be shorter?
And it would have been shorter. So, the whole criminal justice reform, that's a whole another topic. But somebody like you who had family with those type of experiences, I think that definitely serve you well on the bench. And hopefully we can have more judges like that who kind of knows the consequences and repercussions of somebody being incarcerated, how it impacts their family. So I think that definitely will serve you well.
Thank you for saying that.
So, as you said, you're going for this county court. What type of crimes will you be coming, or what type of cases will be coming before you in this Group 11 county court?
So it could be a lot of different things. The chief judge is the one who assigns you to a certain division. So I couldn't tell you exactly whether I would be in civil or criminal, but you would handle anything from small claims, evictions, civil cases that are under a certain amount of money, and misdemeanors, traffic, anything that wasn't a felony. in the criminal side. So it could be a range of things, and whether or not, and what that would mean for somebody who was in that position would be decided by the chief. But those are the types of things you would see.
Okay. And you're going for Group 11. How many different groups are there in Hillsborough County?
Well, for this election, there's only going to be two contested elections this time. It'll be Group 11, and there's another group, forgive me, I don't remember the group number, but it's another election. But everybody else has already been decided for, already resolved. And so, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you how many groups there are.
Well, we're only talking about...
There's only one to be worried about.
Edwards today, Group 11. Okay. So, if you are a successful candidate, do you have any, priorities or objectives? What are some goals that you have if you would be able to be the successful candidate for this seat?
Sure. So, in working in both public service and private practice, I've learned some differences that I think are really important for a judge to be aware of. In private practice, we are not in front of a judge every day.
Correct.
You set those hearings, they come up for hearing, and you could be in front of any one of the many judges that we have in the circuit, or the county for that matter. And I think it's really important because a lot of the litigants are waiting a long period of time to get these hearing dates. And so on hearing day, on the day that they become before the court, I think it's very important for that judge to be able to be prepared, has read whatever has been submitted, and is willing and ready to make a ruling on that day, because the litigants are waiting so long to get before them that they don't want to be sent back to think about it or work it out. They're getting before the court, and the judge has to be ready to pull the trigger to make a decision on that day. When you're working in the public service, like what I do with Marchman, we are in a courtroom with that same judge every single day. So you get to know how that judge operates, and they're sort of the captain of the courtroom, if you will. But they also set the tone for a lot of people who work in that room, from the lawyers to the bailiffs to the court reporter to the clerk. There are a lot of people who show up every day to make that courtroom work. And I think it's important also to make it a place where people want to come to work, because if you enjoy what you do, your support staff, which is really the ones who make the magic happen, are going to want to come to work every day, and they're going to want to show up for you. And then we could do that. That will then translate into the community by doing good work. And I think that's important too.
Wow.
And I hope to foster an environment that people want to come to, and I want the litigants who come before me to feel like they were treated fairly, and that they had that on their day in court, they got what they needed, whether it was in their favor or not. At least they were heard, and a decision was rendered.
Well, it's interesting how you break it down like that, because it really puts in perspective how many lives as a judge you can impact and touch. And this election cycle, we have state attorneys, county commissioners, but do you feel like I do that sometimes the judge races kind of get overlooked, but if you take a deeper dive into it, it's probably one of the most important races in that election cycle, because just your impact as a judge, how many different issues that come before you and how many lives that you're able to touch. So
absolutely,
that kind of goes back to our earlier comments about the primary, how people need to get out and vote. All the other ones get so much attention, but the judicial races is critical as well.
I think so, and I think that when the canons and the rules prevent judges from involving themselves in politics, because there are issues that are very hot contested items that may come before us in the court, and we have to remain open to hearing both sides of the argument should they ever come before us. And so we can't get involved in party politics, we can't get involved in talking about certain kinds of issues. And I think that's what I have found kind of outside talking to people, is that they're disappointed when I tell them I can't answer the question, because they'll say, what do you think about this? Or how do you feel about this? And I say, I'm so sorry, right? And they think I'm being evasive. But the rules are that we can't, and you wouldn't want me to render a decision or have already passed judgment on a certain issue, because you want me to come, if that issue comes before me, you want me to be able to hear both sides. And so, but I think that's what happens with the judge race, why it kind of gets overlooked, because they don't have anything good to say, right? Because we can't get involved in some of the issues that are really important to the community and the things that people are talking about.
It seems like just the whole judges, judicial, y'all just have it hard from the beginning, even from just the campaign. You're limited to, what you can say and all of that, all the way throughout the process. It's like, I almost feel like I just put some tape over your mouth and pull it off with a ruler. But that's awesome. That's awesome. It's kind of good to know about your background. So you mentioned Marchman a couple times. I want to dig into that a little bit. And how did you get involved with that, and some of the rewards for you, personal rewards that you've seen?
Marchman's a very special place in my heart. And actually, this dovetails into what we were talking about with Uncle Bobby. When I went to work for regional council, they said, okay, what division or where do you see yourself working? And I said, let's go see a couple courtrooms and let me get a feel for the kinds of services that regional council is offering. And the first courtroom that they took me to was Marchman. And Marchman is a substance abuse court. It's a problem-solving court. It's a very special court. And when I walked in there, would you believe who was sitting there? It was Dottie, who was the clerk of court in the felony division when I was working on Bobby's case.
Okay.
And so when we locked eyes, I was immediately like, excited to be
instant
there.
Connection.
And it was like a good feel because she was the one who was there sitting on the floor with me, going through the files, like taking the file from me to go run the copy to bring it back. So we had a good vibe. And then also in that room was Kelly Griffin. Now Kelly Griffin was a drug court counselor when I was working in criminal defense practice. And Kelly and I had developed a really strong relationship helping people who were suffering on the criminal side with substance abuse disorders. And so immediately I already felt like
this is where I belong.
I was home.
Okay.
And so I said, I want to stay in this court. And even the supervisor was like, are you sure? Because Marchman is so different than any other court. Yeah. He was like, why don't you kind of check it out and see if you like it? And I said, no, I want to be here. And sure enough, I got in there and really enjoyed the work that I do there, mostly because of the tremendous amount of impact that you can have on people's lives. I am one of the only lawyers that's typically in the room. Okay. The respondents, the people who are suffering from substance abuse disorder, they will get counsel, court-appointed counsel. That's me. And unless they hire counsel, they're stuck with me.
Correct.
The petitioners, they can hire counsel, but they're typically represented pro se. And so in that role, I have to juggle my client's desire versus somebody who is probably not able to make the best decision for themselves now.
Correct.
So we're sort of we're sort of balancing these two interests, his rights and health and safety. And in doing that, we help them get into rehabilitation programs. We help them get jobs. We address mental health concerns, which is, as you know, a huge issue across the board. And in doing that, I have been so blessed to see people come through this program who get their lives back and live a sober life, keep their kids, go on to get a job.
It sounds like a whole, it's so rewarding because it has so many different facets to it, how you impact somebody. More so than just a regular criminal defense lawyer. Okay, he's guilty, he's not guilty. He maybe stole this or did this, where you have to take in so much to consider, the totality of the whole circumstance, and so many factors you have to factor in when helping somebody. So I can see how it can be very rewarding.
It is. It's also a very heavy place to be, because as rewarding as it is to see somebody reach their full potential, we unfortunately see a lot of loss in that court.
Correct.
But what it does for you is it makes you appreciate the work that you're doing.
Okay.
Because you realize that it makes a difference.
Yeah, and not only for you as legal, but for the people that you're dealing with and their families as well. So I'm pretty sure a lot of them have turned their life around, and sometimes maybe those families felt like they're at their wits' end, and what more can we do? And you can come in and really help change that trajectory.
It's just not me. This is a problem-solving court, so it's a special place where everybody works together. So there's drug court counselors, the clerk, even the bailiffs. They become very attached to the people that come in and out of that courtroom. We all work together. It's a collaborative place. Even the judge shares a big role in how we're impacting any one individual's life. So it's collectively together, we're able to do that good work. It's not just me.
Okay. And humble as well. Christine, I think I know where you get it from.
What did we say? Chris squared.
Chris squared?
Yeah.
That's how we say, this is the first show back. So
I know.
Chris squared.
It had to be special.
Are we going to keep this going?
I hope so. I hope so.
I don't know. You're a little limited.
No. I always have time for you. Are you kidding?
I'm saying if you get on the bench.
Oh, maybe then. No. I'll always have time.
I've already got accused by the staff here of being Mr. Controversy, but for our shows, we'll keep it above. Keep it something like, I don't know, whatever. Awesome. I really enjoyed this today. Is there, as we wrap up, is there any last pitch, anything you want to say, like a 30-second why vote for me, or come on.
30-second why you should vote for me
that
we haven't hit? All right. So I have spent my whole life in Hillsborough County, and I love this community. I've served this community, now practicing for 12 years. Prior to that, I started my legal journey almost 20 years ago as a legal secretary.
Okay.
And like I said before, I've quite literally devoted my entire life to the practice. And I would like to continue to serve the citizens of Hillsborough County, work in service as long as I have, and continue to do that. And it's my pleasure, it's my honor to do the work that I have done, and believe that I would be the best candidate for the job.
Awesome.
Come August.
All right. Well, there you have it. Christine Edwards, thankful that you came and took time out of your busy day and spent time with me.
You too.
Inside the chambers. It's great having you on, great conversation. I really enjoyed just the conversational aspect of it, getting to know you, your background, your history, and kind of why do you want to take your legal career to this next step.
Yeah.
So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Inside the Chambers, I'm your host, Chris Chambers. We'll be coming back to you every week with different candidates and different hot topics. So coming to you again from the beautiful Sterling Cigar Bar and Lounge here in Ybor City. Come check it out when you get a chance, and that's all we have for the day. Inside the Chambers, and we are out.